Hello everyone, and welcome to this video here about FRQ strategies for the AP Stats exam. Specifically in this, I'm actually going to talk about question 6, which is the investigative task, and how you can game your way through that question to get as many points as possible. Generally speaking, some general FRQ strategies before we jump into that. Number one, your wording is important. If you're asked to generalize or who you can generalize a study to, be as annoyingly specific as possible. There is a question from 2019, the sixth question, number 6. Very first part is who can you generalize to? And the answer on the scoring guidelines is the rental prices of one-bedroom apartments in this city on this particular website at the time the sample was taken. So, number one, be annoyingly specific when it comes to a question like that. Number two, make sure you include context. Context is a point on every single question. It is the easiest point to get, but it can also be the easiest point to lose if you forget it. If you're questioning whether or not you've included enough context, you probably haven't. That's my general rule. The other piece of advice that I give is that I should be able to read your answer and know exactly what the question was asking. So I should be able to see your response and tell you what the question was. And so that's another quick check for yourself. If you get to the end of the exam and you have some time left over, read through some of your answers to make sure, if I was someone who didn't know what this question was, would I be able to answer that? Would I know what the question was based on my response? And usually, if that's the case, it means that you have included enough context in your problem. Those are my two big overall strategies. Otherwise, understand that you're guaranteed a question on collecting data, which is about either like one variable or two variable data. So we're talking histograms, box plots, dot plots, scatter plots. You're guaranteed a question on sampling and experimental design. You're guaranteed a question on probability. You're guaranteed a question on inference. So any kind of confidence interval or any kind of hypothesis test. And then you're guaranteed one multi-focus question, which will incorporate 2 or more units. Typically, what that question is part A is units 1 through 4, right? So it's analyzing a histogram, calculating a probability, designing an experiment. And then the second part of that question deals with some kind of inference procedure, whether it's a confidence interval or hypothesis test. That's usually how they put those questions together. And then you have question 6. So let's talk about question 6 for a second. Question 6 is the investigative task. And really what that means is, as an AP teacher, we don't know what they're going to ask you. Every year it differs. Every year it incorporates about 4 units into the question. And it's also an eighth of your entire exam score. It's 25% of the FRQ section, which accounts for half of your score on the exam. So doing some probability, that's 12.5% of your AP exam score rides on question 6. The typical average globally for a question 6 sits around a 1 out of 4. So if you can even work your way towards a 2 out of 4, you're sitting great compared to the rest of the people who are taking the test. And so let's take a look at an example, question 6, and see how we can work our way towards those points. Now, this one's from 2012. This is from the practice exam that's on the website. I don't know what the global average was on this question. I can look it up for you, but I believe, if I remember correctly, it was somewhere around like a 1.1, 1.2, which is pretty typical. And so I see in this question, we're trying to estimate the mean number of soft drinks that a student at their school consumes. Automatically, I'm thinking at some point I got to do a confidence interval, right? Automatically, that's what I'm thinking. But either way, we have that Peter selected a simple random sample of 100 students, and then the other student here, whose name I'm not sure how to pronounce, did a stratified sample because they wanted it to be representative, right? Knowing that 60% was female. And so when I see part A, just describe a sampling method or describe a method Peter could have used, I need to make sure I do that same thing and that I am annoyingly specific. Whether that's I'm going to randomly generate 100 student ID numbers and survey the corresponding people. That last part, survey the corresponding people, is incredibly important. If you don't actually say at the end that I'm now going to go talk to these people, you don't get full credit. I know that sounds crazy, but you have to write it. And these are the things that I'm talking about. You can say that you could put all 100 or every single high school student's name in a hat, right? All 2,000 names. And I'm going to pull a name out, record it, and put it back in. You have to make sure in this question that you somehow deal with repeats. So the easiest way to do that is to say that you're going to assign each student a random number from 1 to 2,000, and then you're going to generate 100 unique numbers. That means no repeats. And then talk to the corresponding people. That's how I would answer the first part of this question. Now, if we scroll down here, now we get to part B, and it looks like this is Peter's mean, I believe. Yep. And so it looks like Peter just did divide by. And then Rania is going to do a weighted average because their sample was female and male, and it was a different percentage. Part B here is just calculate the standard error. That's just your standard deviation divided by the square root of n. So in this case, it's 4.13 over the square root of 100, or 0.413. Crazy. But here's the thing. You have to show the work and make sure you put units. Guaranteed here, because that context point, you have to include units. So it's 0.413 soft drinks. Guaranteed here, if I look at the scoring guidelines, if you don't include that context, you don't get full credit. And how incredibly silly would that be to lose a point for not including the words soft drinks? Never assume that they know. Never assume, because they are going to assume, and by they, I mean the AP graders, they are going to assume that you don't know. So make sure that your understanding is on the paper. I get to part C, right? Well, now, this part here, I now have to do the weighted square root of S1 squared over N1 plus S2 squared over N2. And so I would do that, right? 1.8 squared over 60 plus 2.2 squared over 40, all underneath the square root, and get that number. All of these formulas are on your formula sheet, and none of this question is hard so far. So where's the hard part? You can see how long this question is. Okay, I've got a dot plot of Peter's. Notice how I've incorporated now so far sampling techniques, my one variable data and summary statistics, a weighted average with expected value, and now I'm back to unit 1 with here's some dot plots, and I guarantee this question is going to ask you to compare. Right? Well, this makes sense. Explain why Rania's point estimator has a smaller standard deviation. Well, very simply, females and males independently have a smaller spread. So when I compute that standard deviation, it's going to be smaller versus Peter's, which has a much larger range of 17. The largest range in each of her independent samples, the females have a range of 7, the males have a range of 10 soft drinks from my context. So because the independent samples have a smaller standard deviation, her overall standard deviation will be smaller. When you put these together, you can have quite a large range. And now we're still going. Actually, I lied. That's the whole question. So this one ended up not being too bad, but notice how it incorporated a whole bunch of units. I also have a suspicion that a lot of people run out of time. And so that's why question 6 tends to have a lower average than a lot of the other questions. But here's the thing, even on this question, even if you got to this and you're like, man, I really don't know, you could still get yourself a 3 out of 4 by incorporating proper units, showing the appropriate work, and writing a sentence for the first 3 parts. These first 3 parts, parts A, B, and C, are not difficult whatsoever. You just need to make sure that you are that annoyingly specific. So I hope that was helpful, and good luck on the AP exam, guys.